Hi everyone, we are doing Bach Double.
Are you sure you're recording?
Yes, pretty sure.
Just making sure.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate it. No, not at all. Yes, we are 12 seconds in. We are using speed shifter, so let me just check the tempo.
I'm doing second.
You two are on second, we're on first.
Cool.
And I'll give you a little bit more time to get ready. Let's make sure we've got a lovely D minor scale at the beginning. thumbs up while I walked past.
Oh. That suddenly seemed to
They
get...
love our music just there. They
Yeah.
Constantly, thank you.
Yeah, it's a shame that that guy who was there earlier wasn't there, because he would, yeah.
One of them asked me for violin lessons, the guy in the wheelchair. It's like, can you teach me? I really want to learn.
I think
that's
it
so
was a
sweet.
bit weird that suddenly just everybody seemed to come out of everywhere and walk past. So I was just vaguely aware of just people looking at the time.
Well, it is the first time we've had the blinds up for a while as well, but I just think, you know, it's part of being part of a local community, is letting people see and hear what you're doing. Right.
Rushing.
Rushing.
I was rushing some of that.
That was the worst I've played that in forever.
Shut up.
Do not worry. Alone for you, my love.
Oh, amazing, thank you.
It's only on, I think, till Saturday.
Okay, great.
Right, so...
Shall I come out of my practice studio then?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they can listen to us if they want to.
No.
No.
Don't get that shit for free.
They do, actually. It's on YouTube, but now you've sworn. That's fine. Right. We've started talking about it, haven't we?
No.
No. Didn't we do the general sort of...
Oh, we did. Yeah, we did.
Overview. Yeah. So let's remind ourselves of the general overview things we need to think about for the students.
Memory traps.
Memory traps, excellent. Devon, anything come to mind?
Accidentals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About a squillion of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Kit, anything, what did you enjoy about our playing?
How do you memorise all of it?
Thank you.
Work in progress.
I know, but it's just like, so it goes on forever. It's like
It does go
7
on
pages. It's
forever.
like, how the hell do you remember everything?
Yeah.
And the other pieces as well on top of that one. It's just-
Yeah. Thank you. And what do you think we could have worked on more? Or we could work on more?
Well, I don't know, just because you two were just next to me, but it was hard to hear. Your
So,
side.
Devon, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like you hear.
So
but
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Hannah, what else do you think are general things about this piece that you would like to... I'm just going to say, obviously, at any point in any time that we're all together, you can always just say, I don't know, or pass. But just particularly because I know that you always answer every question. So if you just feel like, no, don't want to, just go, no.
Moving between positions.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The positions and the shifting are a real big part of the teaching point of this piece, and also something that you can very much simplify. Like I know that Helen Brodder is now teaching all of the bits that you can in first position, and I have done that when we did it in my group last term. The kids who weren't on it yet did not learn the really hard parts, and they learned all of the tutty parts basically in first position. So that's a great option in that kind of situation. But I wouldn't really want to recommend that you always teach all of it. Obviously you can't teach all of it in first position, but all the bits you can, because I think, you know, we are trying to develop students with really brilliant facility at shifting, and this piece is a really great way to develop that. And you know, when you think about, particularly if they're on the book 4 version, what have they got coming up in book 5?
Lots of shifting.
In terms of shifting, what are the big challenges?
The book starts with 5th position shifting, but they've got the country dance.
Country dance,
That's a
massive,
massive
yeah.
one.
And also,
Oh, the Vivaldi in
yeah,
that.
the Vivaldi G minor
Yeah.
is like, you know, all of it.
Yeah.
So if you miss it out here, perpetual motion hardly has any shifts in it. So if they haven't really done very much shifting since Vivaldi A minor 3rd movement, if they don't do very much in perpetual motion because they can't, and then they don't do very much in Bach Double because you've opted out of it, then there's nothing at all in Bach Double There's not very much, and it's slow in the Vivaldi A minor slow movement. I mean, it is in different positions, but it's not fast, facile shifting. So then suddenly you've got like 4 or 5 pieces before they get to another massive, you've got to be all over the fingerboard for Vivaldi G minor first movement, and then even more so for the third movement. So that's the toss up. Good, and then also, you know, how to play a duet that is a violin concerto. This is quite an unusual thing to play. There aren't that many of them actually written in the repertoire, but they've got to really understand how to listen to one another, how to play their parts that are not interesting and not important down, and the bits that are important out, and which bits are a proper duet where you actually are really, you know, the interplay is between the two of you. So it's a really sophisticated thing to play, isn't it? That's why they love to get to it. It's because they're like, oh my god, look what I can do.
And lots more, there's lots of ties and not syncopation as well.
Tricky rhythms, yeah, definitely.
What was talking about
And some of it's hard to get together. Yeah. So the way that I approach this piece is 1 page at a time. I mean, that's not quite true. So we would go through to bar 21. I'm talking about the book 4 version for now. Through to bar 21 for the first credit. And then depending on if I've got a slower or a quicker learner, a slower student might go to the just to the beginning of the solo, or to the end of the solo, 41. That might not be enough for a child who's quite, you know, able and learning quite fast. They might go all the way to the tutti in 53. And then most kids will go from 53, well it's really 54, isn't it, the very end of 53, through to the end of 76, because the last 3 lines they've already done. So they don't need to make that 2 chunks. But some of them are basically doing a credit per page. And then we have the preview boxes. So in the second violin part, our preview boxes, page 24, it's written out, but it's bar 75. I think that we went into that in quite a lot of detail last time we talked about it, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
We'll just review it now, but and bar 61, bless you.
Yeah.
Bar 40, sorry I'm going backwards, and bar 28. Those are the 4 preview bits. So if you've got an average child who's just ticking along quite nicely, but not putting loads and loads of time into their violin and doesn't find it really, really easy, you would probably do 1 page at a time. So when they're starting the first page, you would preview bar 28. When they're onto the second page, they would preview bar 40. While they're on the third page, they would preview bar 61. And then as they're on the penultimate page, they would preview bar 75. You might do the last 2 at the same time because of this issue of the end of the piece being the same as earlier.
Oh, and those nightmare 2 bars.
Those ones, no?
34
Oh, you're in a different page, okay. 34.
to 35.
I don't find that they find that as difficult as those preview boxes I've just given you.
Lots of changes.
There are lots of changes. It's definitely hard, but they just do that as a normal box mostly with me. But you know, there's no problem with doing more preview. So I think the thing about the preview, at every level, you're trying to front load what is harder for them so that when they get to it in the piece, in context, they're like, oh yeah, I can do this. Not, they start at the beginning of the piece, like for example, if you're thinking about Lulligabot, my lovely level 2s, that, you know, they can all learn how to play dun 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 really easily. You do not want them to then get and I'll just be like, oh my god, what is this? So you want to have been doing weeks before they even start the beginning of the piece, so that when they get to it, you front loaded it. Does that make sense as a phrase? Front loading. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Devin, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So my general approach is one page at a time with the previews in advance and often with the music. Then they'll often come back and do the memory, or they'll do the memory for the page they've got the credit for while they're learning how the next page goes. Depends on how difficult they find memory, or they'll do it with the music. By the end of book 4, I'm quite relaxed about whether they learn everything off by heart, because I think we've talked about this before, they can really slow down just to memorise, and I think it's not helpful unless they're 9. Like, yeah, if they slow down when they're 9 in book 5, that's fine, they should memorise. But, you know, we very, very rarely have 9-year-olds in book 5, and mostly, you know, it's kids like half of my big group, you know, they're teenagers, they don't want to spend another 6 weeks, well, nobody wants to spend another 6 weeks memorising a piece, but it's not useful to them to spend another 3 weeks just learning the notes off by heart. If they can play it beautifully with the music, let them move on, and if they decide that they want to do it in a concert, or they want to do it as a recital, that's when you go back and say, okay, then you need to learn it off by heart. And in that case, they will have had all of those extra weeks or even months listening to it every day, so it will be much easier for them to learn it off by heart. They will have been practicing it much more. They will have played it in group where they're not quite sure how it goes, but they just follow their friends or they follow the teacher. So there's all of these steps in between that make it easier if you do it later.
So
It's kind of the opposite of preview.
So they learn everything off by heart eventually.
I wouldn't say even everything at this level. I would never not have everything off by heart until the end of the Sykes concertos. Vivaldi A minor is a graduation piece, so they do need to learn that off by heart. But by the time they get to the third movement of A minor, Perpetual Motion they always learn off by heart because it's so easy, because it's just the same tune round and around. So by the time they get to this piece, it's been a mix, maybe. Lots of them do learn everything off by heart still. It's not a problem. But if you've got a child for whom it's a problem, you have to choose whether it's worth it investing the extra time and maybe them feeling that they're holding back, or whether it's worth them, you know, moving forward and feeling better about it, and coming back to memorise it for a concert or for a recital or something.
Okay.
So, once they've got it either off by heart or at a high level with the music, then we do the duet credit. So they would be probably well into book 5 for most kids by the time they get their duet credit, where they can play it with you, but on the opposite part, without your help. And that often takes quite a few weeks to get together, because there are all those bits where suddenly you're like, oh, yeah, when you play it by yourself it's kind of fine, but if you do it alone, it's not.
And do you teach both parts eventually, or?
Yeah. I teach it in the order that it's in. But again, like we had with the group, I taught a bunch of my students who weren't at the end of book 5, the book 5 part, because if they'd all learnt the book 4 version, and then, you know, if they were in like Vivaldi G minor, the middle of book 5, it wasn't too hard for them to then learn the first violin part, so that in our group we could have an even split.
And likewise, would you say that you wouldn't expect to give them credit for the violin 1 part until they were into book 6 for the duet? Okay.
But often they'll do it earlier because they've done it. Because most of the skills that they learn for the duet credit aren't to do with what notes they're playing, it's to do with how it fits together. So by the time they've done it for the second violin part, it tends to come very quickly for the first violin part.
So you do teach everyone both parts?
Yeah, in order, like they are in the books eventually. Yeah, but sometimes sometimes my book 5 students will learn it earlier. I would never teach the first violin part before they've learnt the second violin part. I think that would be quite a challenge. But because there aren't very many extra things that you learn from the first violin part that you haven't started, at least, in the second violin part, I will often bring it earlier. And you know, if you think about book 5 as a whole, you've got the kind of warm-up pieces at the beginning, the first two, and then you've got Vivaldi G minor, which is the massive challenge, and then you've got country dance, which is a huge challenge in a completely different way from Bach and Vivaldi. Almost nothing in common, right? Then you've got German dance, which is not really very much of a challenge at all, just a slight shifting and extending kind of stuff. Then you've got Veracini G, which is relatively simple compared to Vivaldi G minor. And then you've got Bach Double. So as long as they're kind of, I think, as long as they've done at least one movement of the Vivaldi G minor, there's no reason not to bring the Bach Double forward and do it then. In terms of the technical development of the book, because they've got so many of their basic skills really well honed already, it's sort of like, you know, you're kind of at the buffet time of like, well, you can do this piece, this piece, this piece. Like, there's no real reason for us to say country dance should be after Vivaldi G minor. This is a completely different, not completely different, but you know, like playing up-raised spiccato, those big romantic shifts, that's not, you know, yeah, it will be easier for them if they've already done Vivaldi G minor, but it's because they've been practicing for another however many months, not because Vivaldi G minor prepares them for that. Same with Veracini G, it will be easier for them to learn if they don't do it later, but they could easily, I mean, Dr. Suzuki could easily have decided to put Veracini G in as the third piece of book 5. So it's sort of, it's more like just a block of pieces that work as a really great whole together, rather than like book 4 is very much like you wouldn't dream of doing perpetual motion for a kid who's not played a Sights concerto yet, right? If you think they've done Bach Bury, that's the hardest thing they've ever played.
Yeah.
And then you give them perpetual motion, that would be ludicrous.
Yeah.
But if you flip it forward, if you flip forward a book, and you think, okay, this child's played everything in book 4. They played Bach of Arts, they've played the slow movement of Vivaldi G of A minor, Veracini or Vivaldi G minor first movement. It's even, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
You might even say it would be kinder to give them Veracini because it's not as hard, but that's, again, back to that learning like this thing.
Those chords are interesting though.
Yeah, but it's
but it's
not
just
well.
that.
It's not well. Those chords are prepared for by book 4. They're not prepared for by anything else in book 5, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, and I think, and also let's remember that this is the stage where Dr. Suzuki was saying, you know, book 5 is where you start to do the pieces that mean more to your students. He meant culturally in terms of geography, like if you're in Germany, that you would play more. Well, there's loads of German stuff, but you know, or for example, like if you're in America, that you might play more American music. But I think also culturally, this is a point at which we want to start playing more contemporary music, more music by people of colour, by women, different sound idioms. You know, like book 5 basically, if you put book 5 onto your aunt who doesn't like classical music, she wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, it was really varied, would she? I mean, you know, it's kind of, apart from country dance maybe, it's much of a muchness in terms of the style, mostly Baroque, like most of what we play in Suzuki. And so, you know, book 5 is where it all just starts to become a lot more relaxed. Maybe don't say that in your exams. But that is what Dr. Suzuki said. But I think most teachers are expecting book 5 to be taught kind of as it is, and then book 6 onwards it does. A lot of teachers start to not do every piece in every book from book 6 onwards. But we will talk about that at a different time. So, one section at a time, the whole piece with or without the music as a credit, and then much later the duet credit and maybe getting it off by heart. My tick boxes in book 4. Go on, let's have some guesses. Already the same, always the same.
This piece.
Bach double,
Double.
second violin part.
I think I've got them already, so I'm not going to say it.
Well done.
Yeah. I've got them as well.
Oh, good. Okay, we've already done them. Great.
I don't have them.
That's because A, you weren't here, and B, you're not level 3. So I'm not going to go through them for you, but it is on the video. Unless that was the unless that was the moment when the video packed up. There was a moment when I
They'll
hadn't.
be on the WhatsApp.
But it's on the WhatsApp, yeah. There are the pictures of it. I don't want to stop you learning it, but we're going to crack on. Because it's, yes, 12:15. Okay, so I would encourage you mostly to do the shifting that is in the book. You can see from WhatsApp the pictures, the ones that I do and don't do. And so I think really all I want to do is go over the preview boxes and just have a quick look at the first violin part as well. But let's go through those boxes in the second violin part. So the first box I have is bar 4. Up until up to there. Joe, why is that a box? One reason, please.
Good place for the phrasing. Sounds like a complete unit to me.
Sorry?
Sounds like a complete unit to me. It's a good place for the phrasing, but also it's like where first and seconds.
I think we're talking at cross purposes. What is hard in this bit that means it needs to be in a box? Sorry, my fault.
Accidentals. Accidentals.
Accidentals, excellent, especially in the first 8 notes. Especially the G sharp, they mostly won't get. Good. Hannah, one other thing?
The counting for the long notes.
Excellent. And the bowing for the long notes. Counting and saving your bow so that you've got enough left for the semiquaver after. Good. And then the shift in bar 7. I'm not really particularly bothered if they don't do that in third position, if you want them to play. It's just as a general thing, don't do that every time you can. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good. And then the next box. Again, accidentals, particularly the chromaticism in those semiquavers.
Do you do the fourth finger in bar 10?
Yep.
At this stage, have you explained how they can figure out where their fingers are?
Oh yeah.
When do you do that, and how do you do that?
So I would say, and that's interesting, that's why this is a gap in what we've talked about. When do you think, from having done level 2 with me last year, you would expect your students to know? And we will also talk about this in sight reading, which is this afternoon, so it's a very pertinent point. But when do you think you would expect to be, for a child to be able to work out what every note on the violin in first position is called? And what it looks like on the stave. Not immediately like sight read it,
Yeah.
but work it out, have the skill.
But 1 or 2? I tend to, for me, I try and introduce that sort of thing quite early, but if they're not doing much music reading in general, getting it to stick is a problem.
Yeah.
So I'd say by early book 2, they should
Every
know.
note. I think that's optimistic. I mean, obviously, like I keep saying, you can teach whatever you want to teach. You can make sure that your students understand that from day 1. It will just take a lot longer than if you don't. So if you're thinking about the sight reading thing, and I know it was a few weeks ago now that we did the first section of that, maybe have another look at that from YouTube. But we're expecting, hoping, that they will be at the end of I Can Read Music Book 1, by the end of Suzuki Book 1. Now if you think about what the end of I Can Read Music Book 1 looks like,
Only high 2s, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah,
sharps
high
and
twos and
naturals for 2s, and maybe B flats?
No.
I don't even know if it's
There
got
is
B
a
flats
B
on the
flat.
G string, I mean.
Yes.
I think it's just,
I don't think-
moving the 2.
I think it's just a C sharp and maybe the G sharp on the A and E string and the D string. I'm not sure if it's got.
Let's have a
lower 2
look.
and
I will
G
have a
string.
look over lunch. But so therefore you can pretty much assume that your students are going to know the names of every note, as in the letters. But I think there's still a lot of children who wouldn't be able to tell you that an F natural on the E string is a low one.
Yeah, I didn't know that when I had finished my Suzuki 10-year long career.
Well, this is what I mean about lots of Suzuki teachers not teaching sight reading well enough.
Maybe I just didn't pay enough attention.
But if that is the case, it doesn't mean they didn't say it, but it means that they haven't made sure that you've learnt it.
Yeah.
You know, like we wouldn't dream of having a child who we said you need to make a beautiful tone, but is playing with a scratchy sound by the time they've been learning for 10 years. You wouldn't do that because it's such the antithesis of Suzuki teaching. And yet within sight reading, there is a sense of, you know, I've had a really experienced and brilliant teacher say very recently, well, I know how to get my kids to sight read, I send them to youth orchestra. I'm like, oh my gosh! That is not the answer. You cannot just farm it out. They will be that child sitting at the back of the first, copying the fingers of the person next to them and crying when they get home every week.
Yeah.
No. no.
I think it's like proper nouns for things when a change is introduced to them. So when we introduce lotus in book 1, I will say that's C natural.
Yeah, I think that's great, but introducing it and telling them and then being able to tell you straight out of nowhere are very different.
Okay.
And like, you know, Gossek we've got a C sharp on the G string. Most of them won't know that. For my kids, mostly we spend some time during book 3 doing a project where it's like, okay, tell me the name of every single note. Tell me that low one on the G string could be a G sharp or an A flat. They need to really understand the natural semitones, and so the fact that F flat is not a black note and E sharp is not a black note. They've got to really understand how that works with, you know, thinking about the piano, thinking about your fingers, all of those things. It's quite tricky, and I think, if I think about my students who really struggled with it, I'm not going to name names, but I'm at late book 2 into early book 3, and you know, frankly, some of my book 4s are still like, and I said to them, you can work it out, just take your time, use your alphabet, use your mind, use your brain. You know, we're not expecting even quite high level players to know it automatically. So, does that answer your question? Whose question was it? Your question?
That's my question. Yeah.
But mostly I think we're going to talk about it more in sight reading this afternoon.
Yeah.
But if you have a child who can't work out how a note should be played by the second violin part of Bach Double, then I think that's a gap, that's a problem. But there are always outliers who don't do things in the way we wish they would do. Thinking about one of your students who probably can't do that, who used to be my student. So don't judge yourself by, you know, everyone. Okay.
It's also the first piece that I've really noticed it with. It's like you can't fudge it. You can't just listen and
because there are too many and it's too fast. Yeah.
So it was the piece where I was like, oh, we've got to do some sight reading.
Yeah. Apart from maybe those cadenza bits of the Vivaldi A minor.
Yeah.
Although if you do give the sheet out that I made, they probably have just written in high 2 or, you know, an arrow or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so this one. We talked about before. It's on page 24, the preview. Just have a look and see if you have any questions about that. Do you remember from looking at your notes how we approached it?
Which one? The top one or one?
The first one.
The first one. In groups, right?
What do you mean?
What other one am I just saying?
So if you look in the middle of that page 24,
Yeah.
at the end of it, it's got the crotchets.
Yeah.
3 C sharp, B natural, which they didn't print. 3, 3, 1, 3, 2. very slowly once they can do that easily.
Mm.
Good. Yeah, this box you may want to do as a preview. But I think for most of mine, as long as we go through it really slowly and they understand where they've got to keep the one on, where the one has to move up. So keep it on, put your 2 where your 1 normally goes. Then find that same note with the 1. That's the thing that catches them out. And a G sharp. And then a low one. So it's like
So
a
for
dancing one.
You've got the G sharp and then the C natural after that. And
Yeah.
then the high and low, so that for me is a sticking point in terms of memory as well. So what's going wrong here? Why can't I spot where it is?
It's also weird. It doesn't, when it's played with the other part, it makes perfect sense, but it doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
This part.
Mm.
That's what you expect. So yeah, it's partly just recognising that. And then we've got the other preview box. Which again is previewed on page 24 underneath the other one. And unfortunately, the crotchet explanation is pretty much wrong if you're going to do the fingering that I do. So, have you got this from last time?
Yes.
Play open A first, then do the G sharp on the 4, then the 2, only a tone below, so you squish them together, the 4, and then the 3 goes in the gap between them. And there you are in, I think it's black finger pattern, maybe
Yeah.
grey. Anyway, yeah, I should stick it into my book for it. Thank you. It used to be just there, but these things happen. Thank you. So it's brown actually. Any questions about this one?
My favourite bit.
And then we've got another normal box at the end of that page. Because it's tricky, but it's not impossible. I mean, it's not as difficult as the preview box is. Okay, everyone up. We're just going to remind ourselves of the preview of page, the preview of 75, because that's the one that is really the worst out of all of them for most students. And comes in the first violin part, exactly the same, but just over the string. You don't need your running, we're just going to go through the lead up to it. I mean, you don't need your stand.
I was trying to remember, I was trying to practice it the other night and I thought, I need to do this again with Kate because I couldn't remember.
So here we are. Kit, would you video this on your phone and then stick it in the chat so that we've just got it separate from the big video on YouTube, please? Okay, so I'm just going to play it for you so you know which bit we're talking about. So it's this bit. And the tricky thing about it is that the shift is a different distance each time, the finger pattern is different each time, and then at the end we've got contraction and extension. Right, so if you know it off by heart, let's just play it. I'll do my turn, your turn. Ready, go. Let's just find the note. Sorry, that was my fault. We should always find the note first. Okay, so find this note. I think your G is flat. Can you play it with the D? So, this is now just exactly how you would do it with your students, okay? So, my turn. It's a minor third. Ready? Play. Good, and now we're going to play back onto the 1. A tone shift. Okay, stretch your 3 because the next one is a major third. will be the practice for a week, maybe 10 times. Then, so they'll come back feeling much more confident about the beginning of each set and the shift in between. And then, ready? Find your note. So, good. Leave your bow off. Do that shift. It's a whole shift, a whole tone, and stretch your 3. Ready? Pick your 1 up. Let's see if we did it. My turn? No, I didn't. No cheating, go. Well, the F was amazing and then it all fell apart. Okay, so this is also what happens with the students. It's quite fun to do in group if you've got a small group of kids at the same level. Otherwise, do it in your private lessons. So, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Ready, play. Imagine, ready, go. Imagine, and keep going. Good, so then we'll put it all together and still don't worry about the bowing. Fantastic, well done folks. Okay, lucky last, we'll do it with the right bowing. So separate at the beginning. And the slurs come in from second position. Okay, find your note. Find your note. Okay, ready, and. Excellent, and at this point the reason this is preview is because they've got probably at least 2 weeks of doing it really slowly 5 times and then medium 5 times, and then in the second week medium or very slow first 5 times and then up to speed and then gradually getting faster each practice. So it's a big project, those 2 bars? How many bars is it? Yeah, 2 bars, to make sure that you can really get it to the stage where they can play it, you know. Would you like to try at that speed to finish? Let's just play from. Let's play from there. So it's a G. Do you know where we are? Top of the page.
Okay.
Well done. Excellent. Thank you. Good. Any questions about the second violin part?
It's fairly obvious. Okay.
No such
use
thing.
different words. Yeah. Learning when to be prominent and when not to be
Yep.
in this is the first time they're going to have an experience of that. Because by the time they get, as you said, by the time they get to the first violin part, they'd have learned that from this one. But at what point, is there a point where it's glaring like, okay, back off?
Yeah.
That you
And
have,
in fact-
that you have to actually actively teach them.
Yes. In fact, I was going to say that when we were playing it through. So that's a great question. Thank you. Well, the occasional bars, such as 33, but
Yeah.
definitely 36 and 37, the first half of. Like when the others are playing, which you teach in exactly the same way as what we just did, so we don't need to talk about that when we get to the first violin part. But if you hear while they're doing that, it's really awful. And lots of them will do it because it's a really tricky bit to count. So they play loudly because they're thinking dun 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 dun, and then they really just bash it out. So that's definitely a bit where that happens. Bar 52, 53, 54. 59 and 60, that's the bit I was going to call out when we were playing it, but I just didn't quite have the brain power to shout out as well as play it. Yeah, partly because they've just done all of this. And so lots of them are so pleased. I can play it that they just bash it out.
And rush.
Yeah, and rush. And it's therefore the same in the first violin part, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Again, 67, 68, 71. It is a very old-fashioned 1950s style thing to do big rits, especially in Baroque music. So these accompaniments that we have are still sort of taking what Dr. Suzuki would have done, and mostly ick. So, you know, if you're thinking about the end, the same with the Vivaldi concertos. You're really just thinking about it at the end of the last bar. I mean, the end of the last bar.
Yeah, half and full in harmony though.
Save it for a different era of music. Same with I mean, it's just really like that's a really 1950s way to play it. So it's really almost just placing the last note and the note before it. Are you alright?
Yeah.
Good. And to put it in context for book 3, like thinking about Martini Gavotte, not. Which is probably what we both did when we were children. Yeah. Nearly all of those pieces, the recordings are a bit over-egged, in my opinion. Right. If you want to go to lunch, you can, because we're just going to talk about the first violin part and then we're going to have lunch. So I think we will probably come back at 10 to 2. Feel free to stay or go as you like. Level 2s. Okay, so the book 5 version. Do you want to? Should we just play it through, seeing as you haven't played it today?
The
First violin part. Yeah. We just all play that, or do you want me to play the second violin part and you can both play the first?
Oh, do you mean of the Bach Double?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you meant the
Sounds
Bach.
better.
The Bach.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that.
Which?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you're both going to play first violin and I will play second. So it's still.
Yeah, I'm going to use it for this one.
My phone is totally squeaky.
Both. traps are something we haven't talked about. Do you need help identifying them? Because I haven't actually written them in.
Yeah.
I can figure it
Yeah,
out.
you can figure them out. Yeah, well, I think yes. I think what we'll do is next time we play it in repertoire, we'll talk about the memory traps. Could you make a note that we haven't done that?
Okay.
Please, and then we can just do that, because basically the way to do it is for you to play one part each, and then you feel, either whether you got it right or wrong, you feel where the memory traps are, because there's an anxiety that raises its lovely head.
Anxiety ahead.
So again, we're approaching it one section at a time. You have the boxes. Don't miss out all the shifting, all the same stuff as before, really. Obviously, some kids will need practice boxes in places that you may not expect, but the ones I've put in are the ones that they almost always need. So the first one is 22, and it's partly because we really want to avoid that. So they have to practice it slowly with the guide note. Travel on the 1, put the 4 on, play. Bar 22 into 23 of the first violin part, book 5.
Oh, thank you.
I don't use a 4 on the second E of bar 24. So see no reason to use a 4 there at all. And that low 3 on the C sharp is sort of, similar to what we were talking about in the full second violin part. So in terms of bars where they need to be quiet, bar 32,
So a second, but
32 is the only real bit in these 2 pages for the firsts. Sort of bar 14, they do need to be aware that you've got da 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 dun 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 in the other violin part, but mostly I think they do realise that. Any questions about those first 2 pages? Hannah, you look confused.
My computer's saying I can't type anymore because my spaces. I've got no more space. That's
Oh my
never
god,
happened to me
have you
before.
deleted your downloads and emptied your bin?
No. I'm going to just get rid of something.
empty bin first.
Yeah.
That sounds painful.
Ignore me.
Okay.
I'll catch up.
So, bar 36. You approach in exactly the same way as we just did for the other one. You have a practice box in 44 and 45. Wow.
Okay, so let's say again.
44 and 45.
Right.
Anyone watching the video is just going to be like, what are they laughing about? A really crusty man just walked by.
But he was coughing and wheezing and then
And
smoking.
in his hands. A, low 4 on G sharp, 2 on the F sharp, 4 on the G sharp, 3 on the D natural.
So do that open A. Yeah,
Is it
open
actually
A.
the same as the other one? Can't remember. No. So its partner is bar 28 in the other violin part, which you can obviously see on the same music if you want, but
Is it all written right?
that that should make them understand it better because it's that same brown finger pattern that we were talking about. But it's not the same music in the same place in the hand. So they've got the kind of cognition but not the physical dexterity of that yet. Is your computer allowing you to type again? Yay!
Yay.
So we were just talking about bar 44 and 45.
Mhm.
Have you got the fingering in from the pictures?
I haven't yet.
Okay, so the change for the fingering is the last 3 notes of 44 is open, 4 on the G sharp, 2 on the F sharp, and then in the next bar 4, 3, the first 2 bar notes. So that corresponds to bar 28 into 29 of the second violin part, but it's not the same fingers, so they understand how it works, but they still need to practice it. Does that make sense, Hannah?
Yeah.
Great. The end of 51 into 52 and 53, I actually think most of them don't need to practice this much because they've done it in second and first position, which is so much harder in the other violin part. So once you can do which they do in the second violin part, it's really just not that hard because they're so comfortable in third position, but they definitely need to do it as a box. And then obviously it's the corresponding music, bar 58, 59, 50, 10. 58, 59 and 60. And then you have the delight of bar 67. String crossing, chromaticism, finger patterns, bowing, tempo. A few challenges.
And not using too much bow,
Mm-hmm.
because I end up going down.
Yeah. Are you doing a little retake there?
Yeah, but
That is what I would recommend.
if I've run out of bow and not reclaimed going back to a point,
Yeah.
then I end up
You end
more
up
doing
with
the
zigzag.
kind of ghosting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not quite that bad.
No, of course not. As a demonstration.
Yes.
Yeah, they do have to slow their down mode much more than the others.
And push without digging for the up bow, so you don't get
Speed, not push. Speed.
speed. Yeah.
Good, we're nearly there, guys. Still no cork on the wall. Okay. Bar 73, 4, 5, 6, and the first note of 77. I just put in a big box because it's not really awfully hard, but they do need to just go through it slowly for the B flats, the C sharps, the C naturals, the F sharps, the F naturals. So this part. And the reason I keep those last 2 bars in that box, if you've got a child who really can play it, then don't bother. But most of them still need to remind themselves of da bum ba 1 2 da da 1 2 3 da da 1 2 da da do. That is an extremely unmusical way to think of that music. But I find for most of them it's so confusing that because of the way it's written over, you know, it's not just a crotchet, so you can't count 1 beat because it's over the beat. and then it's a tie over the bar line. It's so confusing how it's written. I literally just get my kids to go dun 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 1 2 da da 1 2 3 da da 1 2 da 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 da, and then they can do it. The blocking in bar 74 is the other thing that you just need to be careful that by the time they put that one on, they need to know that they've got to pick it up there and block it over both.
Where are we
74. Or they can block it from the A in 74, the first, like the 5th note. But if they don't block it at the beginning, so if this is just on the E string, and then they try and roll over or hop over to the D, that's what will not sound nice. So either you block it from the 5th note of that bar, which is quite complicated to think that far ahead. Block. That's not what I play when I play it, but it's possible. Or lift and replace. That's what's recommended in the book, is if you look at it, well, it's not recommended, but it's implied that this 8th note of that bar needs to be blocked so that you don't have to hop over to the A string for the D. Do you want to play this? You're both looking a bit confused.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the wrong place. So
Bar
bar
74.
Right.
3 2 3 4. If you block here, 1 over E and A, then you're fine. Most people don't, because you don't need to think about the block for another 5 notes. So if you're going to block from where it says, you know, those brackets above the notes,
Yeah.
you just need to make sure you've released the one on the 5th note. Let's get violins and play it. We'll play from 73. Feel free to use the music if you want to. So, my turn, your turn. Open ears. And then we're going to stop and talk about the next bit. F natural. There it is. Open. Stop. Right, so here, block. Where did I stop? C sharp, find this note please. Thank you. Stop. One more time. Stop, block. That's why you needed to block. And so is this. That's not what I play, that's not what I teach, but that is one option. The other option, release. We're just going to do that. So find your C sharp. So as soon as you played the one, release it. Release. And now block.
Do you keep it blocked?
I don't keep it blocked because there's a note in between each, so it's just the. It's just that. That's the problem.
Like perfectly block that in tune. Like,
Yeah.
We're all great at it, but
Yeah, exactly. That's why I would only do it for those 3 notes, but that means you must release from the one before. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all I have to say about this piece. No, there's one other thing which is not written in my part either, but you do really want to teach in the in the solo parts more, less, but every other note is always less than the note before it. More, less, slightly less, but still less than this one, and slightly less, but this one is still less even going. So the tune you're hearing. And then. And I just did it, what you hear all the time. Or just every single note hammered out. So that is very much in review, like you won't get that the first time they learn it. I would say about half our group did that in the concert, and half of them just couldn't quite manage it yet. And it's more complicated in the first violin part because you've got that shift as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great, so let's have a little bow. Well done.
Such a like tick now. I can't stop myself.